"Claire, it's me, David," a voice called out. I hesitated. My heart started racing. David, my brother, the same man who told me I was cruel, who'd sided with our parents for years. Against my better judgment, I opened the door's chain. He looked terrible. Eyes bloodshot, hair messy, face hollow from stress. "They've lost it," he said immediately. "Mom and Dad. They broke into my house last night. Took our photo albums. Said I'd betrayed them. Jenny's terrified. I don't know what to do." The breaking point. I invited him in. He sat down heavily on the couch, rubbing his hands together. "They've been calling non-stop," he said. "Telling everyone that Jenny's brainwashing me. That you and I are part of some conspiracy to destroy the family. They're threatening to ruin my job. Claire, I think they're capable of anything." I called Marcus again, put him on speaker. He calmly explained that David and Jenny needed their own lawyer, fast, and that if their parents broke into their home again, they should call the police immediately. David nodded, but I could tell he was barely holding it together. When he left, I felt equal parts angry and heartbroken. This cycle of control and guilt was tearing everyone apart. 2 days later, I got another call, from Jenny this time. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. "They broke in again," she cried. "They took our baby's birth certificate, my medical papers, even Lily's toys. They left a note that said, 'Family matters should stay in the family.' That was it. The final straw." Marcus filed for a permanent restraining order and contacted the police himself. They opened an investigation for harassment, breaking and entering, and witness intimidation. When the officers went to speak with my parents, they found their motel room nearly empty. They'd vanished. The truth about David. For weeks, I didn't hear a word. Then, one afternoon, David called again. "They're gone," he said quietly. "They drained my savings before they left. Used my account. I didn't even know they still had access. The police are looking for them." He sounded broken. That night, we met at a diner near his office. He apologized, really apologized, for everything. "For years, I believed them," he said, eyes red. "They told me you'd abandoned us. That you were unstable, dangerous. I never questioned it. I was too scared to. I didn't know what to say." He reached across the table, his voice trembling. "I should have protected you. Instead, I helped them hurt you." We both cried. It wasn't a dramatic reconciliation. It was quiet. Heavy. Human. That night, for the first time in my adult life, I felt like maybe forgiveness wasn't impossible, just distant. Closure. Months passed. The restraining order became permanent. Marcus told me the police eventually located my parents, living under false names in a small town in Nevada. They'd been using fake addresses to send letters to relatives, trying to discredit me online, claiming my podcast was revenge fiction. The irony was that every post they made only confirmed everything I'd said. I didn't respond. Didn't press charges. One afternoon, Melissa came over with coffee and said, "You realize what you did, right?" "What?" I asked. "You broke the cycle. You didn't let them rewrite your story this time." I smiled, tears burning my eyes. For once, she was right. Epilogue, peace, finally. A year later, I moved to Portland permanently. Rachel helped me find a small apartment near the river, quiet, full of light. My podcast grew slowly, and I started a new series about recovery, boundaries, and family estrangement. The messages I received from listeners were overwhelming, people who had lived through the same pain, thanking me for helping them feel less alone. Sometimes, I still dream about my parents. Sometimes, I wake up wondering if I did the right thing. But every morning, I make coffee, open the curtains, and breathe in peace, the kind that doesn't need permission. A few months ago, a small envelope arrived with no return address. Inside was a single photo, me and David as kids, sitting on a swing set, smiling. On the back, in faint handwriting, were 3 words. "We're sorry. Mom." I didn't cry. I didn't call. I placed the photo in a drawer and went on with my day. Because healing, I've learned, isn't about getting closure from the people who broke you. It's about finally closing the door yourself. If someone asks me what I wish for them, the people who abandoned me, I have a simple answer: I hope they learn to be human in a way they never taught me. I hope they find a counselor who drags the needles of the past into daylight and sews together the strands they unraveled. But those hopes are distant. My real responsibility is smaller and nearer, to the people I love now, to the little girl who calls me Aunt Claire, to the man who used to be my brother and is trying to be better. It is to keep learning how to live with my back to the past and my face toward a future I get to choose. They left a note that assumed I would crumble. They were wrong. I figured it out, not because I had to, but because I decided to. Part 2, the knock at my door 3 days later, it happened. I was making coffee when someone knocked. Not a friendly knock. That heavy, deliberate rhythm that makes your stomach drop. At first, I froze. I wasn't expecting anyone. Then came the second knock, louder. Followed by a voice I hadn't heard in almost 10 years. "Claire, honey, it's us. Please open the door." My knees nearly gave out. My mother. She sounded older. Tired. But that voice, sweet and guilt-laced, snapped something deep inside me. Behind her, I could hear my father murmuring something, and David's voice, too. I didn't move. I just stood there, coffee mug trembling in my hand. Then another knock. "Claire, please. We came a long way. We just want to talk." I quietly set my mug down and backed away from the door. My hands were shaking so hard I had to hold on to the counter. My heart pounded in my throat. After maybe 30 seconds, I whispered, "Go away." There was a pause. Then David's voice, "Claire, please. Mom's not doing well. She wanted to see you. You can at least come out and say hi." No apology. No acknowledgement of what they'd done. Just a request, a demand, wrapped in guilt. I didn't say another word. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, listening to them murmur outside my door for what felt like forever. Eventually, their voices faded. I called building security immediately. Told them not to let anyone up again without my approval. The guard asked if I wanted him to call the police. I said no, just make sure they don't come back. When Melissa came over later that day, I told her everything. She listened quietly, then took my hand. "Claire," she said, "that wasn't a visit. That was harassment. You have every right to protect your peace." Her calm tone cracked me open. I started crying, ugly, shaking sobs that wouldn't stop. She stayed with me, made me tea, and reminded me I wasn't crazy for feeling afraid. When she left, I got an email. From David. "I can't believe you treat Mom and Dad like that. They were crying in the hallway. You humiliated them. They just wanted to see you. Mom hasn't been the same since you cut everyone off. You're being cruel. Cruel." That word burned. I didn't reply. The next morning, I booked a flight to Portland. I needed to get away, to see Rachel, my old friend who'd been there when I had nothing. When I was living out of my car, she'd given me a couch, food, and kindness. I trusted her more than anyone. As I packed, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, the doorman called. "There's a woman downstairs," he said. "Looks like she's having some kind of medical issue. She's asking for you by name. Says she's your mother." I went cold. "Call an ambulance," I said. But I'm not coming down. He hesitated. You sure? She looks, bad. Call 911, I repeated, my voice shaking. An hour later, when I went down to catch my Uber, the doorman gave me a strange look. She's been taken to Memorial Hospital, he said softly. Chest pains. Paramedics said it might be a heart attack. I mumbled thanks and hurried out before my legs could give out. At the airport, my phone rang again. David. Against my better judgment, I answered. Mom's in surgery, he said between sobs. This is your fault. You stressed her out so bad she. I hung up. Then I called Melissa. She picked up instantly. Claire. They're saying my mom had a heart attack. David's blaming me. There was a pause. Then her voice, steady and firm. Claire, listen to me. You are not responsible for your mother's health. This feels like another manipulation tactic. Get on your plane. Go see Rachel. Take care of yourself. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. And I did exactly that. Rachel met me at the airport with a hug that nearly broke me. We stayed up late that night, drinking cheap wine, and I told her everything. Every manipulation. Every guilt trip. Every wound. When I finished, she was furious. They don't deserve a single minute of your energy, she said. You've rebuilt your life. Don't let them pull you back into their chaos. It felt good, no, liberating, to have someone in my corner. Someone who saw the insanity for what it was. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. The photo message. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing. A message from an unknown number. When I opened it, my stomach dropped, a photo of my mother in a hospital bed, pale, eyes closed, oxygen tube across her face. The caption said, "She might not have much time left. Do you really want to live with this regret?" My hands were shaking. It was such a low, manipulative move that I felt something inside me snap. I blocked the number immediately and called Melissa. She listened quietly, then said, "Claire, they're escalating because you stopped playing their game. That's what abusers do when they lose control. I want you to call Marcus again, this is harassment." That afternoon, I met with Marcus, my lawyer. He took one look at the screenshots and said, "We're filing for a restraining order. Don't reply to anything they send. Every text, every call, every email, save them. We'll use them if we need to." I nodded, finally feeling a strange sense of control again. For the first time in months, I wasn't reacting. I was acting. The line I drew. The paperwork went through faster than I expected. A week later, I had a temporary restraining order against both of my parents. They were legally barred from contacting me, directly or indirectly. Marcus warned me, though. People like this rarely respect boundaries just because they're written on paper. He was right. 3 days later, a letter arrived in my building's mailroom. No return address, just my name written in my father's heavy handwriting. The guard intercepted it and turned it over to Marcus. Inside, there was no apology, only threats. "You're destroying this family's reputation. If you keep spreading lies on your podcast, we'll see you in court. We have proof you stole from us, and we'll make sure everyone knows the truth." Marcus called me right away. "This is intimidation," he said flatly. "They won't follow through. Still, keep everything. Don't answer. Let the order stand." For a while, things got quiet. Then one night, I heard pounding on my door again. Not the timid knock from before, this was hard, frantic. I froze. Weeks passed with sporadic threats and moments of silence. Then one night, a chilling text arrived, a photo of Lily in a backyard, wide-eyed and oblivious, followed by, "This isn't over." I felt something go cold in my veins. I called Marcus, who said to forward everything. We were building an unassailable paper trail. The police took it seriously now. The detective said he'd request surveillance footage and try to trace the number. For the first time, the system we'd built, the lawyer, the police, the restraining order, had the momentum to push back. Still, hiding is wearisome. Sleeping in fits around the house, locking doors, checking windows, these are not ways a person should live. I was tired of being shaped by fear. One night I stood in my living room and said, out loud, I'm done running. It felt almost ridiculous and wildly brave at the same time. What could I do? I'd tried legal recourse, I'd tried disconnection. I had considered ghosting them forever. But the stalking persisted, and it seemed to me that the only way to end it was to give them a single last thing, the truth, said clearly and without entreaty, then walk away. So I sent an email. Short, ugly, precise, I know you're watching my building. I know you won't stop. Tomorrow at noon. The coffee shop on 8th Street. Just me. No police, no lawyers. One last conversation. After that, you leave us alone forever. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. My father replied with 2 words, we'll be there. That was all. I thought about backing out. I thought about wearing a Kevlar vest and a biker helmet and microphones. I considered calling the cops and making them sit in the corner of the coffee shop like a theatrical stunt. In the end, I chose to show up as myself, a woman who had survived being left with a note, who had clawed her way back from a storage unit, who had learned to be an adult by being forced to act like one. I would be ordinary in a public place, visible and careful and not bait. They arrived exactly at noon. My mother moved first, as if approaching a wild animal. My father was smaller than in photos, there were more years on his face than I'd expected. They sat, wordless for a long moment. I felt the weight of all the years settle around us like humidity. I told them what I needed them to understand. I told them this wasn't a meeting to reconcile. It was a meeting to make one truth clear, they had lost. They had lost me, they had lost my brother, they had lost any claim to their grandchildren. If they could not accept that, if they forced their way back into our lives, I would make sure the truths about what they had done were public and unignorable. I showed them screenshots, the texts, the photos, the messages. I told them the way they had rewritten our family's story and how far their lies had reached. I told them I would not forgive them by default and I would not be the instrument of their redemption. My father tried to interrupt, to say something about raising you, and sacrifices. I let him flail in the thin air of his excuses. I laughed at his claim that I owed them gratitude for being the bare minimum. I don't know if it was the anger or the tiredness, but the laugh felt like a closing of a loop. My mother cried and said, "Do you hate us?" I stopped and looked at her hard. "I don't hate you," I said. "I feel nothing for you. You are strangers now, and that is your loss." I left the coffee shop with a lightness I hadn't expected. Not forgiveness. Not peace. But a boundary with teeth and a memory of myself that was not fractured into fragments to be rearranged by other people's whims. After I called David to tell him what I'd said, he sounded relieved and ashamed in equal measure. He told me he wished he'd had the courage years ago. For the first time since this exploded into my life, I felt like I had agency. We took extra precautions. David and Anna moved into a new house closer to mine. Lily's preschool was just down the street. We ate dinner together on Sundays and started building traditions that felt deliberate rather than reflexive. There was no fairy tale reconciliation. There was no dramatic forgiveness moment. There was a series of small, deliberate meetings and conversations and boundaries and legal scaffolding. Months later, we received a letter through Marcus' office. They had entered counseling, they wrote. They acknowledged their wrongdoing and said they understood why we wanted nothing to do with them. They promised to respect the order. I don't think the letter fixed anything, it was a paper ration of remorse. But it was something like an end of the immediate war, an admission that had once been absent. Life coalesced slowly. David got a job closer to the city. Anna found a community she liked. Lily learned to call me Aunt Claire with the sort of unhesitating warmth that felt like a benediction. 6 months after the coffee shop conversation, we hosted Lily's 4th birthday at my apartment. Balloons, a cake that cost too much, friends who had always been on our side. I watched David swing Lily around in the living room and thought of the note on the kitchen counter that had started everything. "You'll figure it out." I had figured it out, not in the way it was meant, but in the way that mattered, what family should feel like, what love should look like. I had built it. I still go to therapy. I still wake sometimes from dreams that bring me back to that storage unit and the smell of the YMCA soap. My trust is a patient, slow-growing thing. I flinch at unexpected knocks on the door. I have nightmares now and then. But most mornings I wake up with a clearer sense of who I am. I am not what they gave me. I am what I built after. People ask if I will ever reconcile with my parents. I don't have an answer. Maybe someday. Maybe I'll read their progress in another letter and feel something tender. Maybe I won't. The truth is, I don't owe them the story of my forgiveness. I owe myself safety, boundaries, and the dignity of a life I chose to make. For now, I keep the letter from them in a desk drawer. Not because I'm ready to forgive, not because I think their apology is pure, but because it records a fact I hold precious: they finally acknowledged the harm. Whether that acknowledgement is sincere or staged is not for me to decide. It's for the future, and the future is no longer theirs to commandeer. The last time I saw my father in public, he tried to hand me a folded note, the kind a child tucks into a palm. I refused it. That day I felt something soft and cold fold into me, not triumph, not hatred, just a quiet, durable peace. I came back to Seattle and the threats escalated. Flowers, a motel message, texts with photos. Someone sent me a picture of my mother in a hospital bed with a caption insisting there was no time to waste. I blocked numbers, changed voicemail greetings, asked Melissa what to do. "Document everything," she said. "Save everything." Then a knock at my door. A woman stood there holding a toddler asleep against her shoulder. She said softly, "I'm Anna. David's wife." She looked exhausted in the way that carries years in the crease beneath the eyes. She asked to talk alone. She told me she had only learned the truth 3 years ago, that the family had told stories about me to justify my disappearance. She showed me social media posts from years earlier, my parents asking for prayers, claiming their troubled daughter had run away with the family's savings. Lies, carefully crafted to make them the victims. I sat with that for a long time. Anna told me she'd confronted them and they admitted what they'd done when she threatened to expose them. She'd watched the narrative come loose faster than they could sew it back together. She had 2 daughters, she said, the oldest 5, Lily, who'd fallen asleep on my couch and who looked at me with a trust that felt sudden and holy. She wanted Lily to have an aunt, she said. No pressure. No guilt. Just an open door. Her visit felt like an invitation wrapped in a hazard. I called Melissa. She said what I already knew: abusers control not only actions but narratives, and that these people had built a convenient story. I had left, I had been the problem. You don't owe them a seat at the table, Melissa reminded me. But you can choose who you let in the room. My father's next email was a bomb. A threat of defamation, hints that they had proof I'd stolen from them, a demand for compensation if I didn't take down the podcast and apologize. I forwarded it to Marcus Hale, my lawyer, a practical, efficient man who smelled faintly of coffee and old books. They're blowing steam, he said. Keep everything. Don't respond. If they actually try to sue, we'll see. He warned, though, threats that escalate can become actions. Document. Record. Protect. David and Anna showed up at Marcus' office with the weary look of people who'd been awake too many nights. In a meeting that was more deposition than family reconciliation, they told a story that was darker than I'd imagined, my parents moving in and out of David and Anna's home, taking money, manipulating, pressuring. They'd been co-signers on David's mortgage, had keys to their house, and had convinced David that I'd left willingly. Marcus told them to change locks, close bank loopholes, and to find a lawyer of their own. They left with instructions and a new sense of urgency. A few nights later there was a break-in at David and Anna's house. Drawers were pulled out and emptied. Photos were missing. The police came and did what police often do at the scene of domestic abuse, took notes, asked cautious questions, and filed a report that felt thin compared to the hole left in the wall where something precious used to hang. Anna's arm had a place where his father had grabbed her too hard. We were in a fight and the weapon of choice was narrative and fear. The restraining orders were the only recourse left that felt tangible. Marcus filed emergency protection, we went to court. The judge listened, saw our evidence, emails, texts, photos, security footage from a gas station near David's old house that showed a car like my father's, and signed 3-year no-contact orders. Walking out of the courthouse felt like being carried to shore when you've been in rough water too long. For the first time, my sense of safety had a tangible shell around it. But legal protections are paper, and paper prints don't stop people who are determined. That very night, someone threw a brick through Michael's car window in the parking garage. The photo of Lily at a friend's house, sent by an unknown number, the note left at our door that said, "Family matters should stay in the family," these were the slow terror of people who wanted to scare us into compliance. Marcus collected everything. We filed another police report. The detective assigned to the case said the surveillance footage put a car there that matched my father's. It was circumstantial, he said, but convincing enough to keep investigating. We started sleeping poorly. I taught David how to set up cameras the way you learn to do CPR in a class because it could save a life. We changed the locks until they squeaked. Jenny, Anna, whom everyone called by her nickname, and Lily stayed with me in my apartment because my building had better security and a doorman who knew not to let certain names through. For all that the life I'd built had been solitary by necessity, I realized how much I'd missed the chaos of family noises, the laughter, the arguing, the toddler footsteps that meant someone else had a claim to your space. One night I woke to the sound of my father's car circling the block at 2 a.m. I took pictures, sent them to Marcus. He said it wasn't technically a violation, because he hadn't left his car. The law has strict definitions and ways that people exploit edges. We were learning to live in that edge, to exist within the parameters the law allowed, and to brace ourselves for the behavior that fell outside it. The escalation continued, a floral arrangement with a note, "We know where you are," that we refused at the door and reported. An email that threatened to drag everyone we knew into a lie if we didn't comply. Another text with a photo of Lily at a friend's house. Each act was a small strike, a subtle differentiation between intimidation and violence. Marcus kept filing. The detective kept pressing. The restraining order hearing was set. Court felt surreal. My parents were there, smaller and older and fragile looking, but their eyes were sharp and empty at the same time. They denied everything. They talked about reconnecting and how they had been forced into hard decisions. The judge didn't buy their novel of excuses. He signed the order that prevented them from contacting us for 3 years. I remember leaving the courtroom and feeling like I had closed a door that could not be opened without consequences. The first real boundary that had teeth, after court, my parents tried another tactic, shame. They called me ungrateful in a voicemail and tried to paint me as a monster who had taken their sons from them. They wanted to humiliate me into letting them back in. I thought of the note on the kitchen counter from 12 years earlier and laughed, not because it was funny but because the absurdity of their continuing performance was almost cinematic. I sat with my brother and Anna and Lily at my kitchen table and watched the toddler stack plastic cups into towers. The small human joys felt like a kind of sanction against pain. When I was 17, my parents moved 2 states away and left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Plain as a grocery list, you'll figure it out." That line still sits in my chest like a splinter, small, sharp, impossible to ignore. I read it, then read it again, convinced it had to be a joke. There was no love at the bottom. No explanation. Just those 5 words and a single coffee ring where someone had set their mug down and left for the res. They didn't come home. The landlord called me a week later to tell me they'd taken the car, cancelled the lease, and that I had 7 days to get out. 7 days to pack a whole life that had never felt like mine anyway. 7 days to figure out how to be an adult in a world that had shown me only how to survive the next. I think people picture teenagers who run away as willful and dramatic. That wasn't me. I wasn't running away. I was left behind. 12 years after they left, I was still living the life I'd built when my career took a turn I never expected. A podcast I did as a side project, just me talking about surviving family estrangement and the weirdness of being abandoned as a teenager, went viral. 1 million views in 4 days. Emails poured in. People told me I had given words to feelings they'd never been allowed to name in public. Strangers wrote to me about their parents, their siblings, the holes that had never been filled. I read them all at 2 a.m. with a cup of terrible coffee and felt the small, private hum of validation. But the next message that broke that hum was a subject line that froze me, "You're." It was from my mother. Not an apology, not a, "we were wrong," just a short paragraph saying she'd heard my side and maybe we could talk. Then a message from David, "We miss you. Can we fix this?" He was the one person I'd left with a sliver of hope for. He had been a kid when everything happened, I told myself. He couldn't have known. He must have been trapped. I didn't answer right away. Melissa told me to sit with it for at least a week. Give yourself space to feel whatever comes up, she said. She was right. I told my assistant to handle anything that could wait. I let the emails sit in my inbox like landmines. 10 days later, curiosity beat my caution. I replied to David with the simplest question, "Well," he answered within an hour. The podcast. He said he had no idea how to reach me, said he'd looked for me a few times, that he'd been scared to call, that he was proud. The pattern was familiar, the sudden concern when someone else validated my pain. When I asked why he waited until I was public, he sent a longer email, business failures, health scares, bills piling up, his wife pregnant and scared. It was a sob story stitched to a plea. A few days later, my inbox had old family photos attached, me as a toddler, the 3 of us at the beach when I was 5, David and me building a snowman. "We made mistakes," my mother wrote. "We want to make amends." The photos felt like props in a play I hadn't auditioned for. I met David alone in Portland. He was based there now, because the idea of parents felt like a bigger risk. He showed up older, a little heavier, receding hairline where a boy had once had a mop of curls. He stood awkwardly when he saw me, and when he apologized, his voice cracked. He said he'd been a kid, he didn't know, they told him I was the strong one who would be fine. He spoke with a shameful earnestness that made my defenses falter, then harden. He told me things, that their business had failed, that their life had been chaos, that they'd convinced themselves leaving me was for my own good. He said he'd been too scared to stand up to them. I told him about sleeping in a storage unit, about showering at the YMCA, about peanut butter by the spoonful. He crumpled. "I didn't know," he whispered. And maybe he didn't. Or maybe truth is complicated and people prefer their preferred version of it. He didn't ask for money, which surprised me. He asked to know me. We parted with a hug I let linger but didn't return fully. He seemed remorseful. Remorse is a slender reed and I didn't trust how he'd been trained to bend. After the meeting, my mom called. I hadn't shared my number with her, David had. Her voice sounded strained and older than the photos. She cried and told me how proud she'd always been. "We were in debt," she said when I asked why they left. "We thought you'd be better off with social services. We thought you'd be placed with a better family." Her words were a tourniquet of rationalizations. I hung up and threw my phone across the hotel bed and screamed into a pillow like I'd never forgiven them for anything else but the sound of their reasoning. The email from my dad came the next morning. Not an apology. A litany of hardship, and then, at the end, a request: could I help them? Relief and avarice and entitlement are cousins in some families. I forwarded the email to Melissa with the subject line, and there it is. She called me immediately. We talked about boundaries and forgiveness and how the law could shield me, but not the small, private terror. You don't owe them anything, she said. But closure might help you move forward, however you define that. I nodded, but I wasn't sure what closure looked like. I agreed to see David again, thinking it was right to keep him separate from the parents. We met in a public coffee shop. The first 20 minutes were small talk and the rest was confession. He explained that when they left, he was 15 and they told him I'd chosen to stay with a friend. That I'd left them. He sounded younger than his age for a moment, a boy who'd been told how to feel. But he was 15 then, not 5. I pressed him on why he never called or checked in the years that followed. He admitted shame. He'd been manipulated, he said. They'd been controlling and good at rewriting the story. He'd been afraid. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to be pragmatic, to adopt the relationship with care and rules. But that night my mom sent more emails, photographs of me as a child, lines like "Don't you think you've punished us enough?" My chest constricted in ways therapy could name but not unmake. I flew home, found flowers outside my apartment with a card that said, "Please call us. We're staying at the Holiday Inn until Wednesday." I threw them in the trash chute.